Hi, it's Anne here, and today's video is all about repressing eyeshadows. This has been a request from a few people. I've done videos like this before. If you look up my makeup mashup videos, I've repressed a few things. But in this video, we're just going to do straight up repressing. I'm not like destroying any makeup in this video, which is fun at times. This video is just about repressing. I will put it out there that I've only ever learned this from like watching other people and reading what other people say. So take what I do with a grain of salt. Other people have different techniques or different recommendations. Repressing doesn't always work as you hope it does. Some things just don't repress well. Or if you try to press loose shadows, it doesn't really work because they don't have the right binder to be like pressed. I also apologize if you hear some barking. It's not my dog. It's another dog down the hall. A cute little guy, but he's a barker. My little guy's just sitting on the couch trying to stay awake. We just did a good hour-long walk, so yeah, he's ready for a nap. Anyway, okay, so what we're going to be repressing today, I'm going to be repressing, I think I'm going to do these three shadows, and then this. And then I have this empty pan here because I do want to take out, I am going to take out a few shadows out of this, but specifically I'm just going to repress this guy and scrape it out and put it into here. The reason why I'm doing that is this already has like a thing on it for a magnetic pan, and I don't think these are magnetic. I'll have to add little things to the back. You can get these little kits on Amazon. That's where I got mine. So if you're repressing stuff, you get these little like metal discs, and there's like squares and discs and like a little tool. The tool that I got this time, like when I ordered this set, I don't like as much as the old one that I have. The old one I have is a bit narrower, like thinner. I just like it a little bit better. But yeah, so like that's how, these are from other palettes, and then I just put the little metal thing on the back so it sticks to the magnetic pan. The other thing that I'm doing differently this time, so basically what you do, it's like a very easy process. Step 1, mash up the powder. Step 2, add in a bit of rubbing alcohol or isopropyl alcohol. Step 3, swirl it around, mush it in together. Step 4, press it. Step 5, wait. So the rubbing alcohol that I use is this. This is 70%. Sometimes people say to use 90%. I don't know what's better. I think 90% dries too quickly from what I understand, because it's got more alcohol content. The other thing that I'm trying out this time, which I think is going to be like a genius move, is I've put a little bit of the alcohol into this bowl, and I have a little like dropper thing from an old serum that I washed out, and yeah, I think this is going to make things so much easier, because that's one of the hardest parts, is trying to get the right amount of like rubbing alcohol to powder. Sometimes you do too much, sometimes you do too little. It's always a bit of a experiment. So I'm going to zoom in a little more and let's get started. So I'm going to start with this guy first. Just a little pan that I had from the NYX 4 Nutrus palette. Let's zoom in even more. Let's get real close and personal. Look at that pattern on, where am I here? Where am I? This is the game of trying to figure out where is the center, because the camera is like to my side. So we're in the middle. This is the middle. I got to keep reminding myself this is the middle, because I tend to go off camera. So I am probably going to chit chat through this because that's what I'm going to do. So if you just want to like fast forward through stuff and skip through stuff, totally understand. So yeah, you basically just need to break it. Some of them are easier to break than others. I just use like either end of this. It doesn't really matter. Smaller pans are kind of harder because it's hard to get like your finger in there to press it. And it's harder to get in here to like mix things up. You kind of like have to be careful. The other thing that I like to do sometimes is when I do mix it up and repress it, I like to kind of move it away from the edges a little bit. It doesn't always work. Again, it's harder to do in a small pan, but like in a larger pan like this, I'll try and press it like more just in the center than the whole pan. Hopefully that makes sense. So I feel like that's mashed up enough. I'm going to go in and add a couple of drops here. The consistency that you're looking for is sort of like a clay consistency. It's better to err on less wet and then add a bit more, because it's hard to, like, once you've done it too wet, then you're like, well, it's fine. I can't unwet it. Other than just waiting for it to, like, this is maybe a little too wet. It's not bad, actually. This is like pretty decent consistency. I don't know how well that is showing up on camera in terms of consistency. Again, I've learned to like kind of stay on the slightly more drier side. Don't wet it too much. You don't want it to be like, do you remember when you were a kid? Did anybody else do this? Because I did it all the time. When you make ice cream soup, you take the ice cream and you stir and stir and stir and make it soup. That's not the consistency that you want. You want it to be more like clay or like Play-Doh. You want it to have a bit of stiffness to it. So hopefully that makes sense. I could maybe add a tiny little bit more to this. Let's add, this is where I'm hoping this will work in my advantage, this little dropper thing. And like, this is really difficult with this really, really tiny pan. I'm just going to put that out there. Okay, so I feel like I've kind of mixed it enough. So now I'm going to just try and like press it a little bit with this tool, which again is a little tricky because it sometimes sticks to the tool a bit. This is just sort of like where you're playing a little bit as best as possible. This one is not very good to repress, just because again it's such a tiny pan that it's pretty tricky. But we're doing it anyway. It's not always going to be perfect. You're going to lose product. One of the benefits of repressing is you can mix shadows or powders together and create a new color. So like if you had a face powder that's too yellow and you have another one that's too peachy, you can mix them together and then you've got something new that will work for you. That's something that I'm trying to do more often, instead of being like, oh, this just doesn't work for me. Find ways to like mix things together. Okay, so I've kind of patted it down with this tool. Now you take, again, where am I? Center, right there. Now I'm going to take a paper towel, and this is something that, again, I've changed up. I used to press really, really hard. I don't press as hard anymore. I don't think you need to. I think sometimes if you press too hard, then it ends up being too hard of a pan and you can't pick up the product on a brush. I err on pressing a little lighter now than I used to, and it seems to work a lot better. Yeah, sometimes the product breaks a little sooner, like breaks down, depending on the powder. I haven't had too much of an issue with my eyeshadows, but I've seen it with like face powder. Sometimes they sort of like break apart a little bit more. But yeah, there it is. That's it pressed. I mean, it's not beautiful whatsoever, but it's so much more functional than trying to like scrape the brush around the edges. It's easier to like use it now. So it looks a little bit darker than what the actual color is. When it dries, it'll go back to normal, generally. Every once in a while, I've seen a powder that just kind of looks a little different than it did originally in the pan, but on my face, it's never really looked a whole lot different. So I'm going to go ahead and do the face powder now, because the eyeshadows are all going to be kind of the same thing. Let's do a face powder. So this pan is actually a bronzer. It is a very old bronzer, like super old. Like I don't even want to admit how old this is, but it's still good. I still really like the product, but it's time for me to finish it. I am getting kind of frustrated, like using the brush around the edges. I'd rather bring the product to the middle and make it easier to use. I do find too, like if you're a project panner, I do find repressing things sometimes make it easier to use it a little bit faster. Like, I don't know, I feel like you start using the product a little bit more. So again, we're just gonna mash this up. It's always this part's my favorite part. Just like breaking up these pieces. It just, I don't know, it looks so cool to me. So yeah, you're just gonna break it all up. It doesn't have to be perfect. You want to break it up as much as possible, but I mean, you're not looking for like a fine grind. It's not going to be as broken up, or like it's not going to be a powder like the way like a translucent powder would be, a loose powder would be. You're just kind of breaking it up to smaller, little tiny small pieces. And like I said, sometimes like you kind of have to be okay with whatever you're repressing. It might not work. Like sometimes it just doesn't work. I've tried to repress some things and it just never repressed properly, and then I've just kind of used it as loose powder, and then you kind of get to a certain point where you're like, okay, I've used as much of it as I can, and it's time. Sometimes it's more effort than what it's worth. I really like this bronzer because it's sort of like this reddish color. It's got a bit of shimmer to it. I've talked about it, like I've really never had another bronzer that's quite the same shade. One of them that's pretty close is the Becca one, which of course now they don't make them anymore. I think it's called like Bondi Sands is the shade I have. It's a bit deeper than this one, but it has a similar effect. Not exactly the same though. Although I do find, I did do like a bronzer ranking video, and most bronzers look fairly similar on the face. There's not a whole lot of variance. I mean, and I love bronzers. I want to buy all the bronzers. I want to try all the bronzers, but I mean, it was a bit of a reality check that truthfully, I mean, unless you're buying really different kinds of shades and different types of formulas, a lot of them are going to look very, very similar. Okay, so I feel like that's pretty good. You can see there's still like some chunks in it, but it's fairly broken down. So now I'm just going to take my alcohol. I'm going to put a lot more drops in this just because there's a lot more product here. And start mixing it in. I feel like I'm baking a little bit. If you're familiar with baking and folding your wet ingredients into your dry ingredients, that's basically what this is. So yeah, you can see this is still kind of a little too dry. Still a little bit too powdery, so let's add some more. And I'm sure there's other people that have done videos like this, and they're much more elegant and make it look like this Martha Stewart-esque video of repressing. That's not me. Unfortunately, I am not that well put together. So yeah, just kind of mushing this around. It's still a little too dry, so just keep adding a little bit of alcohol as we go. I'm really liking this dropper idea. I'm so glad I thought of it. I thought of it before in the past, and I've just never done it. I end up just pouring a little bit into the lid of the bottle, and then pouring a little bit of that out. I feel like that's the best way that I've done it in the past to sort of control how much I'm putting in. Okay, I feel like that's a pretty good consistency, so I'm going to start like pressing it down and bringing it together. Again, I could press it evenly across the whole pan. I've just kind of learned my preference is to sort of bunch it into the middle. I just feel like I use the product better that way with my brush. It ends up being an uglier pan. I'm just going to put that out there. It doesn't look as pretty as if you like smooth it all down perfectly throughout the whole thing. But I'm really not about aesthetics with this. I'm more about what's more useful for me. But again, like, it doesn't really matter what you do. Like, it's all whatever you want. I've just sort of developed that as my preference to sort of mush it into the center more instead of spreading it evenly across the whole pan. I mean, the benefit of spreading it evenly across the whole pan is if you are a project panner, you're going to hit pan faster because it's thinner. So, I mean, that's always a good motivator for some people. It makes you feel like you're getting through the product. Whereas if you do what I'm doing, you're not going to hit the pan as quickly again because it's thicker, obviously. So again, it's all personal preference with this. And again, like, some people are going to take more time to make sure it looks perfect. Take more time to make sure they don't lose as much product. Sometimes I end up losing product just because I'm not careful. I'll rush through what I'm doing. But, you know, it's not the end of the world. Not the end of the world at all. It's just makeup. And I'll be honest, I have been hesitant. I generally don't repress expensive products unless they're close to being, like, finished or they're totally broken and I want to salvage it. I wouldn't repress something just for the sake of, like, oh, I've hit pan, so I'm going to repress now. Like, I really think about, do I want to repress this? Because, like I said, sometimes repressing things does not work. I'm trying to make this look a little bit nicer. So this isn't even, like, the middle of this pan is a little bit higher. It's just how it sort of worked out. Okay, so now I'll just take my paper towel and use my fingers to press. In the past, I would use, like, something heavy and really press hard. I just don't think that's necessary. The way that I'm doing it now, though, you will have a bit of crumbling around the edges. Again, that doesn't really bother me a whole lot. But it's always just personal preference with some of this stuff. And that's it. That's it repressed. I might tidy this up and press it in a little bit more. But for the most part, that's it done. Again, it kind of looks a little darker than it was. It's obviously still wet. What happens is because you're using alcohol, the reason why I use alcohol is because the alcohol will evaporate, leaving the product as it was. Again, sometimes a little bit of that alcohol will break down the product a little bit, so it doesn't repress exactly the way the product was originally. But for the most part, it's pretty close. But yeah, that's it. I'm just gonna do the rest off camera. I might come back and just show a little footage of what these look like once they're dry to just kind of show that they will look a little bit different than what it does right after. I usually leave them for a minimum of about 6 hours. Usually I leave it overnight. Like, I'll just leave them out because I usually press it, like, maybe in the evening after work, and then I'll leave them out, like, open like this overnight, and then that's it. Then it's ready to use the next day. For me, personally, generally that seems to be how it works. It's a day later, and just wanted to show the products as they've been repressed. So there's the bronzer. There are the eyeshadow shades. These 3 were from the palette. These are 2 more that I pressed. This one was the remainder of what was in here, which was actually very little. I didn't realize how little that was. And that was another shadow that I repressed. These 6 shadows are the other 6 that I took out from here, and I did repress this guy. And then these 4 shadows are 4 shadows that I took out of another palette that I've already actually thrown out now. So yeah, that is the results of the repressing right here. And if you hear crunching, that's little Luffy having his dinner. So I'm going to wrap up this video here. I hoped you liked it. If you did, feel free to do the little thumbs up below. I'm really zoomed in. And if you haven't already, I would love it if you subscribe to my channel here in Toronto, Canada. I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you sometime soon. Bye!